The city was alive in its usual Monday morning frenzy, fast-moving but going nowhere. Horns blared, tires screeched, and the air buzzed with impatient murmurs from people who had already had enough of the day. The scent of burnt coffee and gasoline wove through the streets, a familiar perfume of routine chaos. But Mira Lawson had no interest in the city's rhythm. She stepped out of her deep blue coupe, heels tapping against the pavement with an authority that needed no announcement. She wasn't here to waste time. She was here for a purpose. The West Haven District Courthouse loomed ahead, tall, austere, the kind of place that promised justice but rarely delivered it. Mira had walked these halls enough to know the truth. Justice didn't live here. It merely dropped in on occasion, usually in shackles. She adjusted the weight of her leather-bound portfolio, its contents more dangerous than any weapon. Inside was evidence powerful enough to tip the scales of a high-stakes case. In her other hand, a slim manila folder, ordinary in appearance, explosive in value. 5 steps from the courthouse doors, the moment struck. "Ma'am!" Hands where I can see them. Mira stopped cold. The voice behind her carried the sharpness of authority. Not a request, a command. She turned slowly, her expression neutral, heartbeat steady. 2 officers. White, hands hovering near their holsters. Detective Greg Monroe and Officer Trent Lawson. She didn't need introductions. She knew their kind. Different names, same playbook. Monroe took a step forward, squared his stance, made sure his badge was in clear view, like it was supposed to mean something. "Drop the bag. Step away." The words were calm, but the eyes said otherwise. Myra's lips curled, just slightly. Oh, this was going to be interesting. "And why is that?" she asked smoothly. Lawson was already sizing her up, eyes darting to her folder like she was smuggling top-secret intel. Because, apparently, a black woman in a suit with official-looking documents was now a national security concern. "You match the description of someone engaged in fraudulent legal activities," Monroe stated. Fraudulent legal activities. Mira let the absurdity of it sink in before exhaling a slow, measured laugh. "Let me guess," she said, tilting her head. "A black woman, dressed professionally, carrying legal documents. Yep. Sounds like a serious crime." Monroe's jaw clenched. "We need you to cooperate." There it was. Not a suggestion. A demand. Myra's eyes flicked toward the courthouse entrance. She was minutes away from presenting evidence that could change a case. Instead, she was here, dealing with another episode of predictable harassment. "I work here," she said plainly. Monroe didn't flinch, didn't ask questions, didn't care. Because explanations never mattered. He reached for his cuffs. "You resist, it's obstruction," Lawson added casually. Mira almost laughed. Obstruction? From standing still? Monroe's patience wore thin. The cuffs snapped open. Mira didn't resist, didn't protest, didn't give them the satisfaction. She simply raised her hands and let them play their game. Because they thought they were running the board. They had no idea she was about to flip it. The holding cell was cold, the air thick with the scent of bleach and bad decisions. Mira sat with her back straight, hands neatly folded in her lap, the picture of calm control. She had been in precincts like this before. She knew the routine. But this time, she wasn't just waiting. She was listening. Beyond the bars, Monroe and Lawson were deep in conversation, speaking just low enough to think they weren't being heard. "She had the documents on her," Lawson muttered. Monroe sighed, annoyed. "We just say she was faking clearance records." Myra's fingers curled slightly. "Oh, so that was their angle. Not just an arrest. A frame job. Forgery. Impersonation of a federal officer." The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so tired. She exhaled slowly. Not in fear. Not in anger. In exhaustion. Because this was the same script, the same tired lie, recycled yet again. And men like Monroe always thought they could get away with it. "She's a nobody," Monroe muttered. "Judge will believe us." Nobody. Mira inhaled deeply, lips pressing into a thoughtful smile. They had no idea who they were dealing with. She let them talk. Let them dig themselves deeper. Let them give her all the evidence she needed. Then, the door to the holding area slammed open. Boom. Like a thunderclap before a storm. Enter Damian Cole. Tall, confident, a navy blue suit sharp enough to slice through egos, a defense attorney whose name made prosecutors rethink their careers. He didn't just walk into a room, he took control of it, and right now this precinct was his. Without sparing Monroe or Lawson a glance, he strode to Myra's cell. She's leaving. Now. Monroe stiffened. She's facing serious charges. Damien didn't blink. Instead, he reached into his briefcase and slid a thick folder across the desk, his movements deliberate. Monroe frowned. "What's this?" Damien leaned in just enough to make it feel personal. "Oh, just a little something from the Department of Internal Affairs." Monroe's expression faltered. "Turns out," Damien continued, voice smooth, "Miss Lawson isn't just some random civilian. She's a federal consultant on security clearance fraud." The room went silent. Lawson shifted uneasily. "That doesn't mean she didn't." Damien lifted a single finger. A simple gesture, and Lawson shut up. Damien let the silence breathe before delivering the final blow. "And that fraudulent document you claim she had?" He let the question linger, like a predator giving its prey one final moment to grasp its fate. "That document was meant for today's federal court hearing." Monroe's face lost all color. Lawson swallowed hard. "She didn't tell us." Mira finally spoke. Calm, collected, lethal. "Oh, I didn't? Must have slipped my mind. Since I was slammed in cuffs before I even got the chance to open my mouth." Lawson refused to meet her gaze. Monroe clenched his jaw, hanging on to the only thing he had left. Pride. "We were just doing our job." Mira tilted her head, observing him like a scientist watching a failed experiment. "Oh, you really think this is over?" Monroe and Lawson exchanged stiff, uneasy glances. Because for the first time since they arrested her, they felt it. That creeping, bone-deep realization that they had just made the worst mistake of their lives. The air outside the West Haven courthouse was thick with tension. News crews lined the steps, cameras flashing, microphones poised, eager for the story that was about to unfold. Inside, the atmosphere was even heavier. There was a certain kind of energy in a courtroom before a public reckoning. And today, the ones being reckoned with weren't sitting on the judge's bench. Monroe and Lawson sat rigid in the defendant's seats, back straight, faces carved into forced neutrality. But for anyone watching closely, really watching, the cracks were visible. Lawson shifted uncomfortably, fingers twitching against the table. Monroe's jaw was so tight, it looked like he was grinding his own teeth into dust. They were used to being in court as the accusers, not the accused, and certainly not the powerless. Then, the doors swung open, and the entire room shifted. People turned. Whispers ignited. Even Judge Calloway looked up. Mira Lawson walked in. No cuffs. No hesitation. No fear. Her stride was steady. Her expression, unreadable, chilled steel wrapped in poise. She didn't rush. She didn't have to. The room adjusted to her presence. Monroe swallowed. Lawson's grip tightened on the table, because they had never seen her like this before. Unrestrained, unapologetic, untouchable. She walked past the spectators, her heels tapping against the marble floor with a slow, deliberate rhythm. A war drum. And the men at the defense table? They knew exactly what was coming. She reached the witness stand, settling in without hesitation. With smooth, measured movements, she adjusted her blazer, crossed her legs, and lifted her gaze. Judge Calloway, a no-nonsense woman who had seen every legal maneuver in the book, leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Lawson, I understand you have something to present before the court." Mira nodded, exhaling slowly. The room held its breath. Monroe and Lawson sat rigid. And then she reached into her blazer pocket. Lawson flinched. Monroe's teeth clenched. And in one precise, deliberate motion, she pulled out her federal intelligence badge. The courtroom erupted. Gasps. Staggered whispers. A crashing wave of realization sweeping through the crowd. Monroe's face drained. Lawson looked like the floor had been ripped out from under him. The district attorney scrambled, flipping through files, searching for something, anything, to stop the inevitable. And Mira just smiled. Not a grin, not a smirk, just enough to say, You played the wrong game with the wrong woman. Her voice was calm, even, razor sharp. Your Honor, these men knowingly detained me under false pretenses, obstructed a federal investigation, and attempted to falsify evidence. She let it settle. Then she leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with Monroe. But here's the best part. Silence. Anticipation. Then the final blow. I was already investigating them. Dead silence. Then chaos. The DA fumbled, trying to salvage the wreckage. Judge Calloway slammed her gavel. Spectators murmured. Attorneys whispered. But Monroe and Lawson? They sat motionless, like men who just realized they had been walking toward their graves from the moment they put cuffs on her. Their careers obliterated, their power stripped, their future burning to ash. Mira rose smoothly, brushing imaginary dust from her blazer, collecting her things like she was wrapping up a routine meeting. Because for her, this wasn't about revenge. This was about justice. She turned toward the exit. No rush, no hesitation. And as always, she never looked back.